My name is Vail Kohnert-Yount. And after I graduated from HLS in 2020, I went and worked as a legal aid lawyer in Brownsville, Texas, my home state, where I mostly represented farm workers and other low-wage workers in wage theft, sexual harassment, and trafficking cases. And as a legal aid lawyer at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, I was a member of the UAW, which was especially meaningful to me because my mom is from Flint, Michigan. So I have a lot of OG UAW members in my family. And after, I felt like a lot of my work in legal aid in Texas, you're constantly slamming into these structural barriers to getting justice for your clients. And so, sort of the more frustrated I got with my inability to help my clients, the more sort of time I poured into organizing and volunteering with our union in order, to really strengthen and grow our union because I realized so many of my clients, really almost all of them, would not have needed me if they had, a strong and fighting union like ours. So I had the opportunity a little over 2 years ago to start working full time for the UAW. I'm the assistant director of the Northeast region, which is New York City, New England, and Puerto Rico. And so even though I'm not practicing as a lawyer, I use my labor law education pretty much every single day in the course of my work. And I'm really honored to work with, our whole staff come from our membership, our UAW members who now work for the union. And, I always say like I paid a lot of money to learn labor law. And, the people I work with like really have such deep and useful knowledge of labor law. Many of them are not lawyers. Well, almost none of them are lawyers. And many of them, never went to college or never went to graduate school of any kind. And they have such, I often ask them questions, right, about how we do our work. So anyway, it's just a real honor to get to work for this union that I really care about, that I was a member of, and I was also a member of at Harvard. Yeah, that's a little bit about my background. I think the main thing I took away from the project as a whole was, the difference between what the law is and how people experience it. And I think something that was so cool about this project was it was really investigating, like, here's the law on paper, here's how it works in practice. How do we make the law work better in practice for real people? And, unfortunately, that was not a question we got asked a lot in law school. It was mostly learning about the ways the law already existed and very little, with some notable exceptions, very little like critical engagement with how, the way the law actually works for real people. And so it was just like such a refreshing and meaningful experience to get to work on a project like that. And to this day, like I think of, the ideas we came up with in that project. I say we, that's a real royal we because I was a very small part of it, right? But I think about it a lot in our political work as a union. Obviously in this political moment, we're not able to win a lot of gains on the federal level or any gains on the federal level. But, we do a lot of state and local work in very progressive places where we can actually win good things, unlike Texas, where it was just a hellscape. So I think about that a lot and the work that we did a lot. And I actually refer back to it a lot of times, when we're talking about our bargaining strategies or trying to figure out how we can move the ball forward and state and local politics, and really try to build. In the long term, we want to build like a better world here, but the little building blocks we can do now in this really difficult environment to get there. I always joke that like the single most valuable thing I got from law school was my group chats. And so like a lot of my fellow Clean Slate RAs who also happen to be my best friends, we have this group chat and I mean, to this day, we're years out of law school. We text like multiple times per week. All of us are union lawyers or, work at union side law firms or do something related. And so whenever I have a question that, I need to, think about or ponder or, these big questions, I can send it to the group chat and it's like my own little, brain trust, right? So, I jokingly say to a lot of law students, like, keep those group chats solid. Those are the most valuable things I personally got, right? But yeah, I think another piece of advice that it's actually a secondhand piece of advice. A friend of mine from said group chat worked at a union, and she said one of her supervisors told her, listen, there's two kinds of lawyers in this movement. There's sí se puede lawyers and no se puede lawyers. And if you're going to work in the labor movement, we need a lot more of the sí se puede kind, right? And that's another piece of advice I often give people is like, we've got this movement is in crisis, as is the entire country, and to have a new generation of lawyers working hand in hand with organizers to try to say, how are we going to do this rather than you can't do that, I think will make a huge difference. So I often tell people when they're thinking about whether or not to go to law school, law school needs people like you more than you need law school, right? And I often give that advice to organizers who are thinking about, whether to go to law school. And, I think a huge part of our responsibility as lawyers who want to help the movement is like thinking about how we can be useful to it. So that's my general advice is, try to be a si se puede type of lawyer and text your friends. When I started law school, I was really nervous about finding my career fulfilling. I was one of those people who took legal research and writing and thought, oh no, if this is what being a lawyer is, like this is maybe not for me. I love working with people. And I went to law school with a lot of people who like really loved learning the law, and I appreciate them. And I'm glad when they use their powers for good. But that person was not me, right? So I was really nervous about finding like fulfillment in my career. And because I wasn't sure if I made the right decision being a lawyer, right? But now, my career took some really wild turns. Like I sort of never envisioned myself living in Brownsville, Texas, and I certainly never envisioned myself coming back to Boston, Massachusetts. But I think, both of those decisions were motivated by like a desire to be in community and like serve a movement that I really deeply love. And although those were sort of decisions I never thought I'd make, right? Like turning towards asking the question of like, where am I needed the most and where can I be in service to a movement that I care about? Um, those are the big questions, and everything else is, falls into place if you follow those. So it's just like deeply meaningful to me to be part of making this union that has like that changed my family's life and changed my life, and making it stronger and helping it grow and nurturing or organizing. Like that's to me, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. And I could not have envisioned it 5 years ago when I graduated from law school, but just being open to yeah, making decisions that might not make sense to other people, but make sense to you from the type of person you want to be. So that sounds really cheesy, but I hope that the examples I gave are helpful.